Yeah.
Do they have like little keepers?
That's the Port Orford
I
version.
feel like we have that with the camera anyway. Like,
Oh, true. Yes.
this one. Okay, we have one more minute here. I can watch them at 9:30. Okay. Okay, I am calling our meeting to order this evening. My name is Ann Velisis. I'm the president of the Port Orford City Council, and I want to welcome you all here tonight. I'm going to be the presiding officer of tonight's meeting because our mayor, Pat Cox, unfortunately is very sick and cannot attend tonight. So we wish Mayor all the best in recovering. Maybe he'll be able to tune in, but he cannot be here. So I want to, as they say, welcome you all as citizens and our fine candidates that we have for our city council position. It's wonderful to have so many interested people here tonight to meet the candidates for our next city administrator. The format for tonight's meeting is going to be very different from usual, and I will explain that shortly. But let's begin with a roll call of our city council members who are here, but not in their seats up front. Councillor Tidy, Councillor Burns, Councillor Pogwood, Councillor Webb, not present, Councillor Rask, and Mayor Cox is not here. Okay, so as I mentioned, councillors are here to observe, but there's going to be no business conducted tonight. Now, if you would please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so as many of you know, the job
conference will now be recorded.
Okay, oh, whoops, good call. So I will just, since we're just starting to record, I'll just mention that we've had a Pledge of Allegiance, and we've had the roll call, and we have our counselors, all of our counselors here tonight, except for Councillor Webb and Mayor Cox. So anyway, as many of you know, the job of city administrator is hugely important for our special little town. The city administrator helps to keep things ticking along, and so in so many critical ways that I've come to understand, especially as I've been a city councilor. I didn't quite realize it before. I'll tell you how important this job is. So hiring the right person is incredibly important for our community. And for that reason, we've conducted a more robust hiring process this time than has perhaps happened in the past. And tonight's public meet and greet is part of that. So tonight is the chance for you to ask questions of our top candidates. You can put them onto cards and place them into the basket. And if we have follow-ups, you can write another card and put it in the basket. I don't remember what happened to the basket now. Is it still out there? Okay. And maybe Councillor Rask or Pogswood can pass them up if need be. So ground rules for tonight's questions are, first off, that in a public hiring process, there are ground rules that we really have to follow in the public hiring process that have to do with non-discrimination. So please don't ask any personal questions about political affiliation, religion, or gender, age, or marital status, or about people's families. Please don't ask any questions that have bias baked into them. And please don't ask any questions that are crude or rude, because we will be having to screen those kinds of questions out. Please do ask questions about the candidate's qualifications and experience. I put a brief bio on the back table that you can read, and we'll be reviewing that for people who are online. And the candidates will have a chance to introduce themselves to you soon. And also, please do ask questions that are not for just one candidate, but that are for all of the candidates. And if we get similar questions, we may combine them. At the evening's end, there are public comment forms out back that will ask you to fill in with your input on what you hear tonight, what you like, what you don't, if you have any concerns, and please drop it in the box out back. That is like a public comment form. And your comments will be just one input stream that the City Council is going to be considering, along with input from a staff interview panel. We also have a citizen interview panel made up of citizens that serve on city commissions and represent civic organizations. And of course, Council will be conducting its own interviews. So we will be asking questions tonight for about an hour, and then we can adjourn and people can mix and mingle and fill out evaluation forms, and we'll aim to wrap it up by 7. Okay, so with that, I will begin by introducing the first candidate. And actually, Tim, would you bring me one of those bios of the candidates that's out on the table? And just for fairness sake, we have mixed up the order of things. So sometimes one person's first, then another person's first. And we've tried to do it all so it's fair. Thank you, Tim. And the order of introductions tonight is we'll have Una go first, Melissa, and then John. So I'll begin by introducing you, Una, by reading this, and then you can give us a brief introduction. So Una Workabaugh has had a career in economic development, working as a department director for city and county governments, including Winslow, Arizona, and Mendocino County, California, and also working as a consultant, serving clients worldwide with a strong interest in tourism. She has a business and marketing degree from the University of Oregon and an MBA from the University of East London. We welcome you to introduce yourself. Thank you, Una.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I am a gal from the Northwest. I grew up on an island near Seattle. And as Ann just mentioned, I went to the U of O and have lived on the Oregon coast and Cannon Beach for a while, which I know is up a bit, but still on the Oregon coast. I have had amazing opportunities really around the world. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I love small business. And I love small communities that support small business. I've owned hotels and restaurants. I've owned event centers. And I think that having good entrepreneurial support is just a huge part of who I am. And that is kind of what has brought me back to the Northwest. I was most recently the Economic Development Director for the City of Winslow. Many of you have been on Route 66. And I still have a house just a few blocks off of that road. But I am from the Northwest, and as much beauty there is in the Southwest, it's not here. And so I'm back, and I'm really looking forward to having a final place to build a home and stay for a good long time and be part of the community. So I thank you for having me, and I look forward to chatting with you all.
Thank you, Una. Our second candidate tonight is Melissa Radcliffe. Melissa has had a career in public education, serving as a school administrator for nearly a decade. She's worked as principal for Tillamook and Bandon high schools with experience supervising staffs of up to 50 people and managing grants. She has a science degree from Oregon State, an MA in teaching from George Fox, and a professional administrative license from Concordia University. And we welcome you to introduce yourself, Melissa.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I am excited to be here. I live up the Elk River, about 6.5 miles. So watching the river rise and fall has been the joy of what I've been doing lately. I'll tell you that I'm married, and that's why we ended up here. My husband's family have lived here for a very long time. Also in education for many, many years. I have 2 kids, happily married, and am very excited to be here. We again own a home here. This is where we want to make our home. This is where we want to stay for the long term. And I think the experience of being in education and being a principal is very similar to this in that you have to put your best foot forward no matter what comes through the door, no matter what happens, no matter what crisis happens or what the plans are. And the same with budgeting and finances and all the things that it takes to be a good leader. And I think for me, that involves bringing a good attitude. It involves listening to the people and trying to find consensus and make stakeholders feel like they've been heard. So I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And our third candidate is John Huddle. John Huddle has had a career in law and government, serving as an attorney for the city of Medford for 15 years and for Curry County for 5 years. After retiring from the county, he worked as interim administrator for Port Orford for about 5 months. He has an economics degree from UCLA and a JD from Willamette University College of Law. John, we welcome you to introduce yourself to our community.
Thank you, Council President Velisis, and thanks everybody for being here. A very impressive process and gathering. You heard the bio. I've been here before. I was in a Rotary meeting, and a fellow named Gary Milliman, who was the municipal judge here, as well as the acting city administrator, tapped me on the shoulder and said, "John, are you interested in being the city administrator for Port Orford?" And I'd been retired at the time for a couple of years. And I said, "Well, I'm not interested." So he said, "Well, why don't you put your resume together?" And put my resume together, and the city council called me in for an interview. And I had known Tim for a while. I had lived in his park when I was working at the county and waiting for my house to be put in. I'd met Ann through working there. I'd met Pat through his work at the Nasika Beach Water District, and some of the other folks. And so it was a pretty good fit for a while, and got a lot done. There was a backlog of things that needed to be taken care of, and got those squared away pretty good. And I thought everything was teed up pretty good. And I like to think I left the city in better shape than it was when I got here.
Okay, is that it?
Sure.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you all for introducing yourselves. And I have a pack of questions here. And so I'm going to be starting to ask the questions, and we'll be going back and forth, up and down. And you have 3 minutes each, but you might not want to take that long, so say what you'd like. So the first question will go to John. Why? And then we'll go up the line. John, why do you want to work in Port Orford?
Well, I love the city of Port Orford. It's why I agreed in the first place to work here. And I think that's really why. And that's why I, after resigning and getting the council to start this process, I put in for the position as it is now.
Melissa.
I spent most of my time when we purchased our home here in 2015 and would come spend our time here. And this was where we, again, wanted to come home to. So I think Port Orford specifically has a lot of growth opportunities, but also it has a feel that we don't want to lose, that I don't want to have lost in the shuffle. So I am excited to be a part of this community because, again, most of my time for the last few years has been spent in Bandon, and I would prefer to be in Port Orford. So I want to be part of this community. I want to be part of what you have going here. So that's why.
Okay, Una, why do you want to work for Port Orford, in Port Orford?
So I'm really passionate about rural communities. And I think that historically they've been left behind with so much policymaking. And it's not just in Oregon, it's across the country. It's actually around the world, right, where rural communities are left behind. And so because I'm passionate about rural and because I know I want to be in the Northwest, I am looking for that community again that I can call home. And the weather today, for instance, just brings back so many great memories. I love this. And this is the type of community that would suit me very nicely. And I think that my skill sets would suit you really nicely. So thank you.
Okay, we'll take the next round in the other direction. The question is, have you had experience as a chief executive that has prepared you for the personnel, budgeting, planning, community engagement, and administrative challenges of this job?
Me? Okay.
Yep, you first.
Yes. So besides working for various cities as an employee or with the county, it was mentioned Mendocino County, which is just down the road, hop, skip, and a jump. I actually was with Mendocino during the pandemic and was tasked with doing crisis management for them while there. So I've been in situations where I had lots of employees and really big budgets. I'm also a consultant, and that really grew out of being an entrepreneur and opening businesses in rural communities more often than not, where I would approach the city and I would say, or the county or whatever organization was there, and ask for the plan. What's the plan? What's the general plan? What's the marketing plan? What is any plan? The economic development plan. And over the years, many times, they would have no idea what I was talking about. And how could my business excel if the community didn't have a plan, if they weren't prepared for that? So with that said, that came with consulting, not as an employee, but having to work with departments of varying sizes, having to work with elected officials, having to ensure that elected officials put their name in the hat to become elected officials. And that was not only here in the US, but also overseas. I was afforded the opportunity to be the global liaison for Tourism Australia. And that meant that I really traveled the globe. I lived out of my luggage, and I had a staff back in Australia that varied depending on the season, anywhere between 20 and 50 people. And they helped coordinate not only the conferences that I attended, but the educational packets that I would be teaching while I was out and about. And that all translates again to being an entrepreneur. I mentioned I've owned hotels and restaurants and event companies. And though I may not have 100 employees every day of the year or 200 or 50, they came and flowed with different events, which is a lot to juggle, of course. And I think you mentioned grant writing. In the grant writing process, it's so important to know different departments, even though you're not maybe part of the Public Works Department, but to know how the Public Works Department works and what their employees are doing. So
Okay, I'm gonna ask you to wrap it up.
Okay, so anyways, those things and more.
Okay, great. Melissa.
Okay. Yes, I have. As a principal, you again are tasked with, and I was the only administrator in the last few jobs that I have had, which means I was in charge of not only the student health and wellness and discipline that would come through, but also budgeting, the finance, again, working with grants, whether those be federal grants for Title I for reading and math, or for state grants that would come along, meaning having to write needs assessments and do the budgets and figure out how we were going to use those funds and do them well and by all those rules. And so I believe that in leading, that this job would translate to that for sure. So have worked again with employees, evaluations and all of those things, and trying to have a fair process and working with policy, working with the rules of engagement, and then also trying to make sure that the entity is following policy, but also that policy matches what we are trying to do and working towards a larger vision. So absolutely, my experience works with this.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah.
Do you remember the question, John, or would you like me to review it?
I think the question was whether the candidate has any experience as a chief executive officer of
Yes.
a government body or of anybody.
Right.
And my experience most recently was here. And then prior to that, I was not the city administrator or the county administrator at Curry County. They didn't have a county administrator. So I worked an awful lot on putting together the agenda and working with the finance on the budget and work with the HR and personnel matters. And obviously as legal counsel, working with the council on all the important matters they're doing, work with the sheriff on law enforcement and jail and things like that. And then I put together for them the ordinance that they had that created their job of city or county administrator, which looks a lot like the county or city administrator job here. And then prior to that, the years with Medford was similar. I worked with the mayor and city council and the city managers there on the top level items for that local government. So I think my experience makes me qualified to be the city administrator here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, next question. We'll start in the middle with Melissa, and then we'll go to John and Una. What is your federal grant writing experience?
Well, I mentioned it in the last little section. Basically, I was the curriculum director and the federal title programs director for the Tillamook School District for 4 years. And that was during the time when the big push with education was No Child Left Behind, and everyone had to be highly qualified, and you had all of those rules and those things. That fell to me. I was a teacher on special assignment at that point, and the superintendent asked that I come and work at the district office to get leadership experience to hopefully move forward and to see if I liked that part of administration. So being in charge of everything from Title I to Title X, as far as, again, reading and math for students who were falling behind, to Title II, which was teacher education. So I did a lot of public speaking and helping educate the teachers about what was happening, migrant students, and up to obviously Title IX, which has to do with equity for gender, for all genders of students who were in the system. And then Title X had to do with our homeless students experiencing homelessness. So as far as making sure all of those different pots of money on that federal level, that was my responsibility. So yes, I have experience with that.
Great. Okay. Una.
Okay. Yes, grant writing, very well versed. I have great relationships with the EDA and USDA, especially with large federal grant monies. In fact, kind of exciting today, it was announced out of the Biden administration that they've set aside, I could have this number wrong, but it's near $8 billion that will be distributed to all the states to upgrade their water infrastructure. And that means that Oregon's going to get a pot of money. Don't know what that amount will be yet, but that will be viable funding to apply for to help with a number of challenges that I know a lot of small communities have. Just earlier this year, I was awarded $1 million grant to upgrade tourism protocol for Northern Arizona. And also earlier this year, a $400,000 grant to increase the footprint of farmers markets. Again, having a great relationship with your federal partners, especially with the EDA, because they're huge when it comes to distributing funds, is really important, especially for rural communities, so you don't get looked over. There's a lot of money out there right now too for broadband, which I've been very much involved with. I also work with a number of developers on a federal basis to increase housing footprints and ensure that the infrastructure is in place so that the growth can happen in communities for workforce. So yes, would want to apply all those skills to you.
John.
Thank you. So I don't know that I have exactly the amount of grant experience that the two candidates do. I've only done some support work for FEMA grants. And then I was the chief administrator of a couple of FAA grants when I was at the county. The county ran the Brookings Airport, so I administered the FAA airport grant for them. And then at the county, I also administered the Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant for the Brookings Head Start remodel project, which I found to be helpful when we were putting together the city's application here for the grant for the community building. There were a lot of similarities there. And I think the key with the grants is to know that there's a lot of detail work in the applications, and then also detail work in the follow-up and showing your work and documenting when you submit your request for reimbursement and expenditure requests. And then also a little bit of overseeing of the work itself to make sure that the people doing the work who want to get paid are falling in the guidelines of the grant as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this next one, we will start with John and we'll go up the line. Do you support measurable goals for reducing or ending homelessness? Why or why not? And how knowledgeable are you about homelessness in Curry County?
I'm not super knowledgeable about homelessness in Curry County. I'm not super knowledgeable about even homelessness in Port Orford. My view on the city's role in addressing the homelessness situation is that there's very limited requirements legally of a city to address homelessness. There's actually just a prohibition, from what I can tell, on a city to prosecute someone for the status of being homeless. So when I was here at the city of Port Orford, and especially with the limited amount of resources that we have, I recommended we do the minimum from the city's resource standpoint on doing anything for the homeless population. I felt that the homeless population, from what I knew, was made up of people with, whether it be mental health, veterans, addiction, all those populations had resources available to them. And it was better from our point of view to try to route those people to those resources. So I didn't think the city, especially Port Orford, was in the position to do anything. Now, so other than that, if the city council said they wanted to do something, as a city manager carrying out the policy, that would be my job.
Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Melissa.
I would second that basically the role of this person is to make sure that the elected officials and their mandates or things that they want to work toward get taken care of. I feel that a lot of times, again, with schools or veterans or other places have monies for that. I feel like we need to, on a grander scale, work on the infrastructure for affordable housing, which again goes to the water system and goes to the sewer system and goes to all of those things. And so I feel like having a strong housing situation will help with a lot of that. But I also feel like we need to have empathy, and we need to make sure that we are being welcoming to a point. I know there's been communities that have helped so much that then it becomes a mecca, which then can create other problems. Whereas I do feel like, basic human dignity needs to be honored as well. So that's where I am on that.
Hey, Una.
I'm going to say that we're probably all in consensus with the answer to that question. Homelessness is not a problem here or in Oregon or in Timbuktu. It's a problem everywhere, not only here in the United States, but around the world. And I think, again, having empathy is important, but really knowing what the services are that our state already provides and being able to work collaboratively to ensure that we can suggest or refer answers. I think it's also so important that our public safety officials are also well-versed on what those answers are. To take a police officer away from a serious challenge, even if a car accident or somebody breaking in or a house on fire, whatever, is truly a travesty if they're too overwhelmed with dealing with somebody that has a mental health issue. That's not a place for them to be expending their energy on a day-to-day. There are too many resources that are out there, and those resources might be difficult because of our remote location here in Port Orford. But I feel that there's an entity called the COG, a Council of Governments, that we don't have here on the southern coast, that instituting such an entity would help with those more regional problems and challenges that come to small communities.
Okay. Thank you, guys. We'll go take this one from the other direction. We'll start with you first, Una.
Okay.
How would you handle a disagreement between staff or staff and city council?
I think it's really important to build trust with your staff and with council and with residents and businesses. I think that really the best path forward for any community is building that trust. And you don't need to like everybody that you work with, and you don't necessarily need to go out and grab a beer with them on Friday night, but they need to have the ability and the trust that's been built in and built up to be able to come to you with the challenge. So if you have a disagreement, listening to the individuals that are at hand and letting them explain their side of the story and why, what, where, and when, and doing it in a controlled setting so that everyone can have a say, I think can really help clear the air. And I find in my life that a lot of misunderstandings are just that. It was something that was misheard, or maybe something that's happened for year after year, and it wasn't even you that it happened to. It was a neighbor or a brother or a sister, and it's not even your challenge. So listening, I think, is the very first step after having built trust, and then coming to an agreement on how we can move collectively as a team.
Terrific. Thank you. Melissa.
I agree with that. I think the key is building relationships. I also believe that assuming best intentions is something that we can all work on, I think, as a collective group, that people are here to do their best work. I would assume that the people who want to work here are wanting to work here and want to get along and get things taken care of. That's why they come here every day. What I have found is not admiring a problem, but looking at the problem and then using the energies, instead of looking at all the really great, wonderful problems that we have and spending our time there, is to actually try to work to find solutions and look to find consensus. I have done a lot of mediation with, 6th grade girls and sophomore boys and boyfriends and girls, right? All that conflict comes from misunderstandings, as Ms. Una said. So I believe trying to help be a mediator in that, but also they are being paid to, if we're talking employees, they are being paid to come here, and they need to understand that we need to be adults and we have jobs and we need to move forward. So I think walking the line between listening for understanding, and then we need to get the job done.
Okay. John, how would you handle a disagreement between staff or staff and city council?
Well, similar, you would try to figure out what the disagreement was over. And then once you figure out what the problem is, figure out the channel to process that problem through. The city here has collective bargaining agreements with all the employees that allow the employees to grieve a work situation or what have you. And there's a formal process for that. So before the grievance, there can be some informal, which would be just a communicating. But so if it can't be resolved through communication and mutual agreement, you just follow the process outlined in the structures that are available.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next we'll take this one to Melissa first. The unusual character, charm, and special amenities of our community are what many people like about living here. Will you be committed to protecting those things about our town?
Yes, because Port Orford is the gem that it is, because it is kind of fun and funky, and we, have an interesting place. You have to be made of stiff stuff to live here, as I've learned being on the coast for most of my adult life, and in Southern Oregon most of my life. I think this town is amazing in that it does have different people and different amenities that are important. As we've mentioned, small business is important. The Port Orford sustainable seafood and tourism is important. The docks, the Dory Dock is something that nowhere else has. I mean, this is an amazing place. And I believe that the feel and the essence of Port Orford is what is a draw for people. And I don't want it to turn into something like a seaside or something like that, where it goes so far, so touristy, so much to that side. That is not where I want to live. That's not what we need to do here. But I also believe that there are ways that we can improve our infrastructure and improve our town to keep the same feel and the same ethos, while making it a good place for all of us to live. So yes, I would stand by keeping it a little. I saw a bumper sticker the other day that said, "Keep Port Orford sketch." I was like, that'll do. That'll do.
Okay, John, we'll go to you next on that question.
This one, I need to be reminded what the question was. I'm sorry.
Okay, it was the unusual character, charm, and special amenities of our community are what many people like about living here. Will you be committed to protecting those things about our town?
Committed to protecting the charm of the town, for sure. There's a balance there because, one of the issues, we have codes that say you can't do this and you can't do that. And we allow a lot of the things to happen that we say you can't. And on one hand, that's part of the charm of Port Orford, that there's kind of a relaxed enforcement of some of our codes. And then on the other hand, that's where you have some parts of town that are below sketch level, I think. And so that's where, that's the balance. But I feel like I tried to do that when I was here, and I approach it the same way.
Okay, Una, thank you.
So tourism is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and you know that people come through town, and the best folks that come through town are the ones that come into town, spend a lot of money, maybe spend the night, buy a lot of things, and then leave. And I'm not saying that that's ideal, because of course every community needs to grow. There needs to be living wage jobs and there needs to be homes. But by all means, if you look at any community around the world, it's their eclectic, funky, unusual behaviors, usually that makes them the top tier visiting locations anywhere you go. They're the ones that people seek out, and they will drive or fly a very long distance to get there. And you all know what I'm talking about. I mean, if you know that there's a pie shop that has the best blackberry pie on the planet and it's a 3-hour drive, you're going to say, hey, let's make a day out of it. Let's go have a good time. And those are the types of things that set communities apart. And those are things that Port Orford already has. And by all means, we would want to protect them, but we would also want to create policy. So while we're growing, we continue to have that funk, but make it a livable community for others to want to be here as well, so that we can grow the income and we can grow jobs and we can grow community in a consensus that folks agree on, that keeps, again, that je ne sais quoi alive.
Okay, thank you. So the next one, we'll start with John. This is a follow-up question, perhaps, to what you were just talking about, which is, how will you approach code enforcement with limited resources?
Well, I know we have limited resources, but from what I understand, the city administrator job, I think it does place the city administrator at the top of code enforcement, and then our police officer job descriptions actually say they'll enforce city ordinances, which are our codes. So I know we have limited resources and they're stretched pretty thin, but I try to maximize the use of all our resources. But the first approach that I've taken to code enforcement, even when I was here, is you have a conversation with the violator, or alleged violator, I suppose, but you talk to them first, and then if that doesn't work, you write a letter, and then if the letter doesn't work, you can issue a citation. But I think around here, just our police officers issue the citation. So I think we'd have to, work with them on getting them up to speed on that.
Okay, Melissa.
I think that, again, making sure that our policies are in line with what we want to have is an important thing. As I understand it, that in talking with some of the staff, is that seems to be something that hasn't been really looked through very well in the last little while. So I think that would be a key, is to make sure that our policies are, again, there's some, as he mentioned earlier, that you have to do. I mean, they're based on law and state law and things. So you have to follow that. I think being supportive of our law enforcement officials and supporting them in what they're doing, and then follow the process. You kind of said the whole thing. There's a process there of the order of how that happens. And I don't know if there's a specific a specific group of ordinances that are not being followed or that people are concerned with, as this is a follow-up question. But I think trying to make sure that we review our policies, make sure they're in line, and then follow them accordingly.
Thank you. Una.
Yeah, so that's, in my opinion, the biggest challenge with code enforcement is you have codes to enforce, but then you don't have a follow through. And sometimes it's because you don't have staff, sometimes because there's a crisis that comes around. But when your community knows that no one's going to get slapped on the wrist or given a fine for breaking a rule, then they're going to continue doing that. And that's a problem. So absolutely, I would want to know, first off, where are these challenges, first of all, because if it's the same challenge with the same people over and over again, that's a whole different story. So let's have that conversation. But if it's across the board, yes, it stops with the administrator. Have a conversation. Why are you doing this? Why do you have 12 people in a one-bedroom house, or whatever the code is that's being broken? Why do you have 50 cars in front of your house? In my prior community, the challenge was actually homes that were in unlivable conditions, that were health hazards that folks were living in, commercial properties that squatters were inside of. And we also didn't have the staffing to assist those challenges. And that's something to look on a greater scale. A lot of those challenges can work in a more collective manner on a county-wide or on a regional-wide solution. I mentioned a COG before, a Council of Governments. If we were to have a Council of Governments in this region, that could help us find funding to maybe have more support when it comes to code enforcement. But as both folks in front of me have already mentioned, having the conversation first is a great first step, and ensuring that the policies that we have in place are the policies we want to have in place. Do they make sense?
Thank you. Okay, the next one, we'll start with Melissa. And then go to Una and then to John. What experience do you have establishing an effective public communication plan, and what would your strategy be? So,
An effective
public communication plan. So I guess they're asking, do you have experience with public communication, and what would your strategy be for effective public communication in our community?
I think making sure that you know how the citizens are getting their information. So it might be bolstering Facebook, having Facebook posts or social media posts to get to people that have that, making sure that information is put into the newspapers for people who read that. Make sure our website, our things are up to date so that people who are connected digitally can go and get the answers that they seek. I think part of it is to market our town, how we want to be seen. I think we need to be the ones who, not we, the administrator, but the council and the citizenry need to be the ones who are setting the narrative for our town, that we narrate what happens. We don't let other entities or other places kind of pigeonhole what we do or how we are. I think we need to manage that. In working in schools, and especially as the principal, I was the face of that school. And so you have to go and go to different meetings and different things and different trainings and go learn how to market your school to make sure that the information is out there. And I feel it would be similar in this way. So I think it's, again, marketing the town and us driving the narrative.
Thank you. Una.
So I have found, and we all know this, right? Everybody absorbs information differently. Some folks absorb it over coffee in the morning with their next door neighbor. Other people read the newspaper. Other people are on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I think it's really important to have a lot of platforms. I tend to over communicate, and every community I've been in, whether that was as a business owner or working for the county or the city, I've approached the local paper and I've asked if I could be a local editorial, and if I could either do that once a week or once a month, whatever works for them, as one way to communicate to the general population, having an editorial in the paper and encouraging people to reach out to me. I think having a great website is really important, that has the ability to send in questions and be able to contact. I'm big on handing out my phone number to anyone and everyone and saying, contact me at any point in time. My phone is always turned off, so you're never going to bother me. If you have a great idea at 3 o'clock in the morning, send me a text. I would love to hear it. I do a lot of newsletters. I think newsletters are really important. You can choose to read them or not, but at least you have that option. Of course, social media is super important. I have encouraged mayors in the past or city managers to do a weekly check-in on Facebook, a live Facebook message. You know, this is what's going on this week in Port Orford. Love to have you. We have an event coming up, or it was hella raining last week, whatever the story might be. But telling your story is really important, and we should do that across as many avenues as possible.
Thank you, Una. John.
I don't have much experience setting up public communication networks. What I'm familiar with is putting out press releases to newspapers. At the cities I've been at, the local governments I've been at, there's usually been somebody else in charge of what I'll call the web and social media. And social media is tricky because, you know, one day it's Facebook, the next day it's Twitter or X or, you know, Instagram, or who knows what it's going to be. So you can really be chasing some strange thing and spending a lot of time keeping up with changes in technology. But for me, it would be working with press releases, posting things on bulletin boards and things like that. And then informal communications, you know, joining civic groups and talking to people, I guess, would be it. But I don't think I've ever set up a formal communication platform. You know, there's even some things now where you can, I don't know if you call them blasts or something, where you can get people's phone numbers and send texts out to people. Again, I've never done that, but I'd be happy to ask somebody to look into it and see, but it's hard. It's hard. And I don't know what the return is on those kind of efforts either. I haven't done the measurables on them, so I don't know. And then we have, you know, 1,100 people in our city limits. So then the question is, what's the return on investment of, you know, how much time are you going to sink into, you know, trying to create a communication network to reach 1,100 people? But it depends on who your audience is. Again, you talk about and going broad. If it's tourism, you can use your state resources, you know, and local regional tourism boards and stuff. But I just don't know. I don't know how to do the communication part that good.
Okay, thank you. So we have about 10 to 15 minutes left for questions. So I've still got a number here. So maybe let's just ask them, maybe, yeah, be a little bit more succinct if you would, so we can get through them. We'll start. Now I'm forgetting which order we're doing it in. So I'll start this with you, John. Do you have experience with affordable housing, and how would you help Port Orford with that issue?
I don't know that I have experience with affordable housing. You know, it depends on what definition you're using for affordable housing. If it's to meet this X dollar a percentage of median income and this, that, and the other. We, in a civic organization I'm in, there's one fellow who wanted to work with Habitat for Humanity to develop some homes. And I just got back from a conference where a fellow says his civic organization was successful in at least building one $100,000 starter home, which I think would meet most anybody's definition of affordable housing. But I don't have any real solutions on that. I do know that the state has created a new, I can't remember what it's called, but they've got some new housing rules in place where they're trying to allow, I guess, smaller housing to be developed and more dense housing. So I think the concept of affordable housing is smaller and more dense, hopefully means cheaper to build and therefore affordable. So we would, from a city's point of view, if it's a grant and we're building it ourselves, but I don't think we're a housing authority, I don't even I don't have good contacts with the housing authority in our county, but it seems like most of that would go through the Coos Curry Housing Authority. And they should be the people we tap for affordable housing here in our area. It seems like that's something that already exists. But from a city's point of view, we can change our codes to make it easier and cheaper to build, provide water, sewer, those kind of things at affordable prices that would then lower the price. That's about all I got on affordable housing.
Yeah, I think this is a problem not just here. It's a problem all along the coast, trying to find buildable land and trying to do that. I think this is where it's just a huge issue. Where again, homelessness fits. We're also VRBO and second homes and rental homes and things like that. Those are questions that need to be answered here as well. I wish I had the answers to that, because again, it's a massive problem all across the state and even the nation. So I think looking to find the housing authority and figuring out where that works and how we do that in Curry County would be part of the learning for me.
Succinct. I'm very long-winded. So the succinct answer is yes, I have vast knowledge in housing across the board. So yes.
That's really succinct. Okay.
I think I forgot this is
Next question. Tell us about a time when you have had to face a challenge that tested your leadership ability and how you overcame it.
Is this mine?
Yeah, gosh, yes. Why don't you start it, Melissa,
Okay.
and then we'll go to Una and then John.
Okay. Succinct, COVID. Working in schools during that, I was the principal of Tillamook Junior High School, 400 7th and 8th graders and their parents. We immediately had to pivot to learning from home. We then had to try and figure out how to teach kids and deploy all the technology and do in-home learning. Trying to lead through that as the he said, "How did that work out for you?" Well, they're still working on it. Yeah, it was rough. So if you're talking about a massive change in how everything was done at a time and trying to hold the helm through that as people were fearful or people were angry that we weren't in or people were all of that, that was rough because the state kept changing what they were saying we needed to do. The federal government was changing what they said we needed to do. But I think just, again, working with staff, working with the community to try and do the best we can and continue to build those relationships, even though they get strained when all those things happen, was the key. And so that's my very obvious answer, that was brutal and still standing. So.
Okay, Una.
Yeah, COVID. But outside of that, I don't think that anyone is a good leader if they don't have challenges that are presented to them on a day-to-day basis. And if you can't overcome challenges on a day-to-day basis, you're never going to overcome the big challenges when a pandemic comes your way. So being a leader means you have challenges and you have to make decisions. And hopefully you've created trust in your community so that you can do that with respect.
This place was probably the hardest place to try to be a leader. I didn't feel like my leadership was being followed. And so there's a lead follower, get out of the way. So I got out of the way to let the leadership here take over. And now we're doing this.
Okay. We'll start with you on this, John. Please share your vision for the future of Port Orford.
My vision for the future of Port Orford is a place where the city can provide basic city services, meaning water, sewer, streets, and public safety and parks to its citizens with some level of recreation facilities for our youth and activities for them to do and activities for the people who live here. We have good quality of life, and that would probably involve a little stronger code enforcement.
I would say looking at both ends of the water system, try to work on from from the hold at the start all the way through the usage and then creative ways to look at the effluent and things like that. Seems like that's one of the bigger challenges. But I just have a vision of keeping, again, Port Orford a place where people want to come and want to visit and want to be a part of, but also keep the ethos of the town as it is now. I think that's important.
A vibrant community that is welcoming to all and has the infrastructure and jobs in place that allows people to live in a comfort level that they expect, while welcoming people from the outside as they pass through and spend money here, giving them lots of opportunities to do that, while taking care of our citizens and ensuring that there is education and transportation and all the things that makes for a viably economically vibrant location, and why families want to move and stay and put down roots.
Okay. So this question, let's start with Una. If you are selected and accept this job, what would you do in the first 5 days? And how do you see yourself? Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Housing, anybody here has a house? Anybody has a rental I can use? Anyone? That would be my first 5 days. Give me a place to live. Really just talking. I think it's so important to know your community members and being available to be spoken to, just listening and learning. Absorbing as much as I possibly can. If anybody here still remembers the Wonder Kids or the Wonder Twins, where they could just power activate, I would want to learn as much as I possibly could. And what was the rest for the 5 years? Next 5 years?
Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years?
Being a catalyst for positive energy in the community, getting grant funding and other federal dollars to help with infrastructure and ensuring that we have houses, as I already mentioned, and educational opportunities, transportation, things that everybody expects and should have, as well as still being a safe community where your kids can go out and ride a bike and you don't have to worry about them and where they're at and what they're doing, would be my vision.
Okay, Melissa.
5 days, I think it would be mostly being here, looking at meeting all of the staff and listening to them about what has worked and what maybe they would see as a priority of how they could help improve their job, how they would see things that would help make them better employees. I think meeting the people and having an open door to listen and to converse with people to see what their vision, and also with the council and the mayor to find out their vision also, because it's not just the city administrator that sets it and does it. There's a lot of people who have been here a lot longer than I and have good ideas. And so I think listening to that, the 5-year idea is to continue to be here. I will be swimming in the Elk River in the summer and tending my garden and my little chickens, and just trying to live a balanced life in a balanced community. I think that's important. We live in the most beautiful place in the whole wide world. And I think just trying to help make people's lives better is always my goal. So I will continue to do that.
Thank you. And John?
I think pretty much the same with what Una and Melissa said. Just find out, communicate, find out what the needs are as quick as possible and try to address them.
Hold on to this is probably a fire alarm, so don't worry. Okay.
6:30. So yeah, just find out what the needs are and try to address them. And then a 5-year, I just don't know if it's realistic to think anybody would be the city administrator. I don't know how often we've had a 5-year city administrator, but the city administrator job and the county administrator job, it's the exception, not the rule, where it's got a lot of longevity. But 5 years is probably at the edge of reality on that.
Okay.
You're really selling this. I'm really selling this, man.
Can somebody we need to pull you off to the side there.
I mean, maybe you guys have had long city managers here. I don't know. It's really the exception, not the rule.
Okay.
And that's
Okay.
not just here.
Right.
Leadership's hard.
Yeah, it's not just here.
Okay. Well, it's now already a little bit after 6:30. We've made it through most all of the questions. We had some that were doubles and stuff that we put together. And so I really want to thank you candidates for your candor and giving us such good answers to questions. I feel like we are very fortunate to have such fine candidates to consider. For everybody in the audience, these candidates will be going through more in-depth interviews tomorrow. And I will be adjourning this meeting and would encourage everybody to mix and mingle with the candidates. And also to remind you, when you go out the door, there are forms where you can evaluate the candidates or make a public comment about the meeting tonight and just stick it in the box. Okay. So again, thank you all very much. I thank everybody for coming tonight. Really appreciate everyone's interest in our community. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting at 6:34. Thank you. No, that's it. Oh, we had them on cards. That was it.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
Thank you, everybody.
So I'm a little confused. So this says it goes till 7 or?
We're gonna mix.
Oh, so there can be,
You can mix and mingle.
okay,
People.
okay.
The people.
So good. All right. Okay. I think. Well, actually, I wanted to talk to. Since he. I know.